Let's take a look at this thing, this corona virus that's going on in China, that's coming out of China. And I haven't talked about it much because you never know how much of this is being overemphasized, and there just aren't enough facts. And one of the reasons there aren't enough facts is because the Chinese lie. Right now, and this is coming from the New York Times, a former newspaper, so, obviously no enemy of communism. This is half of China's population. Half of China's population is facing new travel restrictions. What are there? A gazillion people in China, so half of them are facing new travel restrictions. Across China, officials have imposed controls of various kinds on people's movements, hoping that minimizing contact will prevent the virus from circulating further. To gauge the scale and breadth of these policies, the New York Times examined dozens of local government announcements and reports from state-run news outlets. The Times analysis found that at least 150 million people in China, over 10% of the country's population, are facing government restrictions about how often they can leave their homes. 150 million people are being told how they can leave their homes. Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton, who has been on this very carefully, he says that the situation is much worse than China is letting on. This is the First Cut 5.
The situation is very grave, in part because, as you say, China was lying from the beginning and they're still lying today, and also because there are so many unknowns about this virus. For example, how many people one person can infect once they have the virus, the extent to which it's contagious before one is symptomatic, or the mortality rate. That's why I've been saying for almost a month now that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, to quote Benjamin Franklin, and why the president was so smart to ban travel coming from China just a couple weeks ago, so we didn't have more than 20,000 people landing in our country every single day from mainland China.
All right, so we're going to get back to that, right? Who's banned travel, and Cotton saying that is a good thing. And this stuff is happening over there. Like one doctor who was the guy who actually broke through the news embargo in China and told people about this virus. He has died, apparently, from the virus. Another doctor who is treating people has died from the virus. And Cotton is saying the original story was that because China has these open food markets, the virus got into these food markets and then went out and spread through these food markets. And Tom Cotton says that's not what happened.
Here's what we do know. This virus did not originate in the Wuhan animal market. Epidemiologists who are widely respected from China, who have published or studied in the international journal The Lancet, have demonstrated that several of the original cases did not have any contact with that food market. The virus went into that food market before it came out of that food market. So we don't know where it originated, but we do know that we have to get to the bottom of that. We also know that just a few miles away from that food market is China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that researches human infectious diseases. Now, we don't have evidence that this disease originated there, but because of China's duplicity and dishonesty from the beginning, we need to at least ask the question to see what the evidence says. And China right now is not giving any evidence on that question at all.
Okay, so that's like a Stranger Things kind of Stephen King thing where there's this lab nearby near the market where this thing started, and it's a lab where they study, probably so they can kill us, they study viruses. He's not saying that that's where it originated. He's saying there's a chance, and we don't know because there's no information coming out because the Chinese control the press, the leftist press. Now, I want you to listen. First of all, the Washington Post, where democracy dies by taking thousands of dollars from the China Daily to run news stories that are Chinese propaganda in the Washington Post that look like Post stories, even though they are marked as advertisement. And the China Daily has been accused of not reporting this. You have to report this stuff to the federal government, and they haven't been doing this. But the Washington Post gets a lot of money from Chinese advertisements. So the Washington Post, where democracy dies in darkness at the Washington Post, right, attacks Tom Cotton and says he's spreading this conspiracy theory, which you just heard him what he said. He's not spreading the theory. He's saying we don't know, but this is something that's also possible. They keep calling it throughout the story. They keep calling it debunked. It's a debunked story. It ain't debunked. Here is the Chinese ambassador, Kui Tiankai, responding to Tom Cotton. You listen and you tell me whether he debunks this story.
It's very harmful. It's very dangerous to stir up suspicion, rumors, and spread them among the people. For one thing, this will create panic. Another thing is that it will fan up racial discrimination, xenophobia, all these things that will really harm our joint efforts to combat the virus. Of course, there are all kinds of speculation and rumors. There are people who are saying that these viruses are coming from some military lab, not of China, maybe in the United States. How can we believe all these crazy things?
If that doesn't sound like a Democrat to you, I don't know what does. We can't say these things because of the effect it's going to have on the people, not because they're untrue. And remember, again, Cotton didn't say this was the truth. He said this is one of the things he's looking at. We can't say these things. Oh, you're a bigot. You're bigoted against Asian people. And oh, yeah, maybe it's really a laboratory in the United States that's doing all this. I mean, it is classic left-wing propagandizing. And then the Washington Post steps up after taking thousands of dollars from China Daily to run ads that look like news stories in their paper. The Washington Post steps up and says, oh, well, it's debunked. It's debunked.